I think that probably the people who say that Peter Sellers' comic flair amounted to genius are probably absolutely right.
Because you always knew that there was that kind of lunacy lurking.
Monsieur has been walked!
He would say, I don't have a personality, I only am the character that I'm playing at any given moment.
And I am Group Captain Lionel Mandrake.
Dr. Strangelove.
Mr. President.
Peter was absolutely brilliant on the first take. The second take, he was even better.
I do know when I did see Dr. Strangelove for the first time that Peter was absolutely brilliant.
I mean, the great thing about Sellers, he could play almost any character he wanted to play.
Well, let me finish, Dimitri.
Fantastic! Oh!
This story is no idle fiction.
Peter Sellers spent the majority of his time on screen making people laugh. He did this by being many different people, but never himself. As the beloved Inspector Clouseau in the Pink Panther movies, he created a truly original filmic character.
He could just sort of slip into a role with such ease, whether it was sort of a complete aristocrat or a sort of grinding, you know, sort of plebeian, whatever. On either side, he could do that.
He was an enigma. He used to say he didn't have a personality. He would say, I don't have a personality, I only am the character that I'm playing at any given moment.
He was so brilliant and so incredibly talented that he was many people all the time. In fact, I had kind of a sense that he was afraid of all the people he was, because who knows what would come out.
His parents were traveling stage performers. Peter grew up rootless, lonely and unhappy, a child in a world of adults. Backstage, he began observing people and mimicking their body language and speech patterns. He developed a wide array of funny voices. In the early 1950s, Sellers employed many of those voices by brilliantly playing multiple characters on a cutting-edge radio show. The program was superbly imaginative and surreal, forever changing the landscape of British comedy.
There had never been that form of anarchic humor before.
The Goon shows didn't attempt to make any sense.
And Spike Milligan wrote most of them, but of course Peter was an absolute central force in terms of the performance and the voices and so on. And it had a tremendous impact, and young people loved it.
The influence of the Goon Show on me was the fact that when it came to Python, when we could write whatever we wanted to write, the material I was doing and the characters I was sort of thinking about very much influenced by Milligan and Sellers.
Radio success was welcomed by Sellers, but it had never been his primary goal. A movie buff since he was a kid, Peter was desperate to break into films. And right from the start, he exhibited what would become his trademark, playing multiple characters in the same film.
This is the gun that killed Legs Monaghan.
Arrested at once. No. One moment. This is a water pistol.
I know, sir. He was drowned.
That's what I like, folks. A man with the courage of his convictions. He's been convicted more times than I care to remember.
Many other movie roles followed, and by 1962, the young man with the funny voices had become one of the biggest stars in the British film industry. The very next year, his glorious turn as Clouseau, the defective French detective, brought him international stardom.
Peter had, by then, the ability to project some of his personal attitudes onto an existing character and give it a kind of depth and resonance. And that's where he was at his best, because you always knew that there was that kind of lunacy lurking, which made for a very exciting performance.
Well, now, what happened is one of our base commanders, he had a sort of, well, he went a little funny in the head. You know, just a little funny. And he went and did a silly thing. Well, I'll tell you what he did. He ordered his planes to attack your country. Well, let me finish, Dimitri.
And that's, of course, Peter Sellers' strength. You literally don't know whether it's going to be something provocative, sensible, totally insane, whether he's going to sing, dance, explode.
Don't you know that General Ripper went as mad as a bloody March hare and sent the whole wing to attack the Soviets? Don't you know that?
What are you talking about?
I'll tell you what I'm talking about. I'm going to pick up this red telephone, which is connected to SAC, and I hope... Blast. Blast. Shot away, I expect, by one of your men during this ridiculous fighting. Right.
I would say probably primarily an actor, but also a superb comedian. And to me, it's a very... this is a personal thing. Good comedy to me comes once a character is created, not from being able to tell a joke and not from able to do a really skillful piece of physical comedy, a very clever pratfall, or from a clever bit of mime.
And he was subtly but grandly very funny. See, he could be funny by being so committed to the character. The real kind of funny.
I do know when I did see Dr. Strangelove for the first time that Peter was absolutely brilliant. Sellers captured each particular character, I thought, perfectly.
I don't know if it was Peter's ideal or Kubrick's ideal, but you gotta have a versatile actor. I mean, if you have someone who's one-dimensional, one note, there's no way they could play multiple roles in a film, or you're just gonna have a duplication of the same person.
I think Strangelove was probably the best example of his versatility, and it was quite breathtaking, not just because of his various performances, but the fact he was also, this was an English comedy actor off the BBC Home Service, suddenly appearing in a major American movie with a great American director, Stanley Kubrick, and I think one felt rather proud, you know, that it was a bit like the Beatles storming America, that Sellers could be chosen to play not just one but three roles.
In a way, what seems so extraordinary about Peter Sellers playing those three roles in Dr. Strangelove wasn't that amazing if you reflect that he played more roles than that in The Mouse That Roared, and that was in the tradition of Alec Guinness, who played all of those roles in Kind Hearts and Coronet. So the idea of the kind of anonymous actor, and that would be Guinness and that would be Sellers, who can step into 4 or 5 or 6 roles in the same movie was already established. And in Dr. Strangelove, he was doing something that he had done before and that Kubrick knew he had done before and knew that he could do.
Sellers and Kubrick first worked together in 1961 on Lolita. Their creative dynamics sparkled and mutual trust quickly developed. So taken was he with Peter's performance that Kubrick immediately cast Sellers in multiple roles in his next film.
Peter was very fortunate in several of the directors he found, because they worked on the same wavelength as he did. Dick Lester, certainly. Blake Edwards, up to a point. And especially Stanley Kubrick.
Pete was great for improvisations. He was very professional. He always knew his lines. But his lines also can be changed.
Stanley Kubrick was a director who didn't regard the script as a blueprint, but as a restaurant menu. And you went around choosing the dishes and combining them.
Sometimes there would be a few improvs thrown in there, and if Stanley liked it, great. If he didn't, we'll go again.
And you went on until you reached that crucial rehearsal moment when the seed of revelation slipped out of the performance and the actor was transported and gave you something that wasn't in the script, wasn't even in people's minds.
It would not be difficult, mein Führer. Nuclear reactors could... I'm sorry, Mr. President.
Stanley did a great amount of takes because he is an absolute perfectionist, and I don't think he was ever really very happy until he got what he wanted.
You had to get Peter early in during takes, because after 4 or 5 takes, he would lose interest. And he told me that was one of the things that he just really got to him when he worked with Stanley Kubrick. They would get to 30 and 40 takes, and he just didn't know why he was doing it. But he still went along with it because he trusted Stanley.
Peter loved a man who would let him improvise. Peter was absolutely brilliant on the first take. The second take, he was even better. Stanley used to say to me, he reaches a kind of ecstasy of comedy.
Is that the whole point of the Doomsday Machine is lost. If you keep it a secret, why didn't you tell the world, eh?
Peter preparing for a role, I think he had to get the voice right, first of all.
There was an American photographer, a very famous photographer called Ouija, who specialized in taking street scenes of gangland murders and car accidents and fires and so on in New York City. And he had been brought over by Stanley to photograph some of the sequences in the film, still photographs.
Hello, Ouija.
Hello, Peter.
Ouija, tell me something. I've been
I want to tell you something. I think you're the world's greatest actor. And I worked in Hollywood for about 12 years. But you top them all.
Thank you, sir.
You top them all. If you don't get an Academy Award, I'm going to...
Tell me, what do you think of Kubrick as a director?
I think he would be the most talked about director. He's the easiest going guy. He knows what he wants. Yeah. And I think this is it.
I think this film will do a lot of good for him.
Oh, yeah. Not only that, I think this is filmed with guts, and people will think about it, and it could happen.
Yeah. All these things gave Peter the clue to how Dr. Strangelove might speak.
Nuclear reactors could provide power almost indefinitely. Greenhouses could maintain plant life. Animals could be bred and slaughtered.
Fantastic! Oh! But see how he could orchestrate his characterization according to what level of comedy was required.
Of course, it would be absolutely vital that our top government and military men be included to foster and impart the required principles of leadership and tradition.
You know.
What few people know is that Sellers was supposed to play yet another part in the film.
When I took the movie, I understood that Sellers was doing 4 roles. By the time we got to our scenes, there was Slim Pickens playing the captain of the bomber crew, Major Kong, and not Peter Sellers.
Some people say that Peter couldn't play the character successfully.
Sellers really, frankly, told Kubrick, I don't know if I can do that Western cowboy accent.
I don't believe that for a minute.
What he said was, this is too much. I mean, we're over the top here. We're pushing the envelope way too far.
I think Peter was just a bit fed up at that point. After all, when you play 3 characters in a film, you've got a very heavy workload.
You know, 3's a crowd, 4 is impossible.
So Peter had an accident, let me put it that way, in which apparently his ankle was twisted or dislocated, but it rendered him unable to play the part that it required him to move fairly adroitly in the film.
Dr. Strangelove was an astounding achievement by Peter Sellers. 3 great performances in one film, for which it was assumed he would win an Oscar. Although nominated, Hollywood's biggest prize eluded him. Shortly thereafter, Sellers suffered a massive heart attack and was clinically dead for 2.5 minutes. He made a miraculous recovery, but the experience, physically, mentally, and emotionally, permanently changed him. He went from movie to movie, character to character, without thinking where his career was leading him. Over the next 16 years, his fortunes rose and fell. But even in his many failures, there was always a spark of cinematic brilliance that was uniquely Sellers. After resurrecting his career in the mid-'70s with 3 new Pink Panther blockbusters, Sellers put his passion and energy into filming his dream project.
I liked being there enormously. It's an extraordinarily good performance. And if you compare it with the other noted performances of that kind of idiot savant, of Forrest Gump and Dustin Hoffman in The Rain Man, less showy and to me infinitely more impressive.
And I wanted to do it very much. I knew it was a supporting role and all that, but I simply wanted to work with Peter in a way that I knew would be probably his greatest performance. I did it just to see a genius at work.
In this one performance, Sellers utilized every aspect of his extraordinary talent and was rewarded with superb reviews and an Academy Award nomination. He was crushed when he didn't win. By now, his health was failing rapidly. At 53, he wasn't old, but he looked old. He suffered yet another heart attack. This one was fatal. On July 24, 1980, Peter Sellers' funny voices were forever silenced.
I think the favorite film that I would take away with Peter would be Strangelove, because I think it's such an extraordinarily good film, and that Peter was a part of that.
I think he thought Strangelove was the best thing he had put on screen. But he was still sure that there was something better to come. So I think that he would like to be remembered by people that knew him, and even by his audience, that you know, it's that marvelous thing of less is more. And I think that there was more to come from him. And I'm sure he felt that too. And it's a great tragedy that he's not here to come into his own.
He was a true emotional artist on whose huge canvas he could paint strokes that just dazzled you.
He was able to embody those characters with so many strange and wonderful characteristics that he became one of the great comic actors of his time.
I think that probably the people who say that Peter Sellers' comic flair amounted to genius are probably absolutely right.
Well, I think if genius means someone being able to do something which no one else can do and do it superbly, then Sellers probably was a genius.
He was unique. That's a better word than genius. There are other geniuses, but there's really only one Peter Sellers.
Oh, and another thing, goodbye.